What I'm about to share turned my entire life at work upside down. And even now, months later, I still can't decide if I overreacted or if everyone else is just refusing to see what was really happening. My name is Avery. I'm 29, and this all began with something so small, so deceptively simple. Me trying to protect my own boundaries. Somehow, that simple act spiraled into a nightmare, and suddenly, I was the one being whispered about in the break room. I became the villain of the office, while everyone else clung to the version of events that made them comfortable. I've been working at this company for 3 years now. My job isn't glamorous. Processing paperwork, answering customer inquiries, pulling reports. But it's steady. It pays the bills, fills the gas tank, and keeps a roof over my head. I'd found a rhythm here, a routine that worked. And for a long time, I kept my head down and focused on doing my job. Then there was Landon. He wasn't in my department, but we shared the same floor, so we saw each other often. He had this easy charm about him, the kind that slips under your radar. Always smiling, always saying good morning, holding doors open, remembering birthdays. He didn't just ask about your weekend to be polite. He remembered what you told him the week before. He was thoughtful in the way that makes people feel seen. Naturally, we started chatting. Brief conversations by the coffee machine, occasional lunches with a group of co-workers. I'll admit, he made the long work days feel lighter. There were moments when I wondered if maybe he saw me as more than just a colleague. He listened closely, laughed at all my jokes, remembered little details about my life. Still, I was careful. I kept things professional. Office romances? They're a landmine, and I couldn't afford to step on one. I needed this job, but there were signs. Subtle ones, easy to dismiss. He'd stand a little too close when we talked, lean in just a bit too far. His hand might rest on my shoulder for a moment longer than it needed to when he made a joke. Nothing overt, nothing you could point at and say, this is inappropriate. I didn't want to be that woman, the one who made drama out of nothing, especially not when it came to someone like Landon, who everyone adored. He was a golden boy. So I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things, overanalyzing. I adjusted my behavior instead. I casually mentioned guys I was dating. I made sure I only ate lunch in groups. I kept things friendly, never personal. I wasn't trying to be cold. I just wanted to set boundaries without setting off alarms. But it didn't seem to make a difference. If he noticed, he didn't care. Or worse, he noticed, and that made it a game. Then everything changed. It was just an ordinary lunch break. I was sitting in the break area with Landon and a few others, eating a turkey sandwich from home. We were joking about something. I don't even remember what, when I took too big a bite and suddenly couldn't breathe. Just like that, I was choking. It was instant panic. My throat seized. I couldn't cough. My vision narrowed, and I was making these awful choking sounds, grabbing at my neck. Everyone froze. Then Landon sprang up behind me. He shouted something about knowing the Heimlich maneuver and wrapped his arms tightly around me from behind. In that moment, I felt two things at once. Terror, because I genuinely thought I might die, and something else. Something I didn't want to feel. Awareness, because while I was panicking and desperate for air, I was also hyper-aware of how close his body was to mine. His chest pressed hard against my back. His arms locked tightly around my torso, his grip firm and unrelenting. I could feel everything, every inch of him, every contour, including things I wish I hadn't felt. The maneuver worked. The chunk of food dislodged. I gasped for air. Everyone clapped, laughed, called him a hero, and I just stood there, silent, shaking, nodding when he asked if I was okay. Then I bolted to the bathroom. I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror, trembling. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel grateful. I felt numb, violated, and I hated that. I hated that my brain wasn't looping the near-death moment, but replaying the sensation of his arms around me, his breath against my neck, his body pressing into mine. Not because the Heimlich was inappropriate in itself, but because it felt like something I'd been dreading finally had an excuse to happen. He'd found a way to touch me, to hold me, that no one could question. No one could criticize a man for saving a co-worker's life. That night, I called my sister. I poured everything out to her, shaking, confused, ashamed of how I felt. I told her about the long build-up, the subtle cues, the ignored boundaries, the way it all culminated in that moment. And she didn't hesitate. Avery, she said, just because he saved you doesn't mean he had the right to make you feel that way. If you felt violated, then that matters. That word, violated, echoed in my mind for hours. I didn't sleep. The next day, I tried to act normal, but Landon wouldn't let it go. He hovered, kept asking if I was okay, spoke in his soft, low voice, like we'd shared something intimate, like we were bonded now. At one point, he cornered me by the coffee machine, told me he didn't think he'd ever forget that moment, that he was so glad he could be there for me. I felt trapped, cornered. His words weren't sweet. They were possessive, like he thought I owed him something for surviving. That's when I knew. If I didn't say something now, I never would. And if I didn't, he might only escalate further. So I went to HR. I was terrified. How do you report the man who saved your life? How do you explain to someone that you felt violated, even if no one saw anything wrong? I sat in that office and told the HR rep everything about the history, the unwanted closeness, the build-up, the way I'd been managing and deflecting for months, and about how, in that moment, all of it crashed down on me. She listened carefully. When I finished, she nodded slowly and said this didn't sound like a one-off. She said they'd open an investigation, talk to others. Landon would get a chance to respond. I begged her to keep it confidential. But gossip spreads like wildfire in offices, and within days, people were whispering, watching me, judging me. I felt in every sideways glance, every sudden silence when I walked into a room. And the worst part? Landon looked hurt, confused, like I'd betrayed him, like I was the problem. For a while, I even started to believe it. I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then I remembered something my sister said that stuck with me. Men like that thrive on being seen as the nice guy because they know women will doubt themselves before they ever speak up. And she was right. My comfort matters. My instincts had been whispering for months. Maybe he never intended harm. Maybe he really thought he was just being kind. But intention doesn't erase impact. And in that moment, when he wrapped his arms around me, I felt fear, not just of choking, but of finally losing control over something I've been trying to protect all along, my right to feel safe, my right to say no.